Hey Snapflash, big moves in Botswana's financial scene. This past week the Grand Palm Hotel wasn't just hosting another seminar, it was ground zero for a national economic reboot. That's the rallying cry echoing from Absa Bank's Private Equity Thought Leadership Forum. Absa Botswana's managing director didn't hold back. She says pensions aren't just retirement cushions anymore, they're fuel for our future. She's talking clinics, roads, water systems, and even Botswana's first sustainable bond, which raised 80 million pula for green and social impact projects.
And I want to thank you all for joining us as we unpack and harness the power of pension funds to drive sustainable growth, not just for Botswana, but for the broader African continent. Infrastructure remains the backbone of any economy. It powers industries, connects communities, and creates opportunities for generations. Yet, across Africa, we face a well-documented infrastructure gap that requires innovative financing solutions. Pension funds, with their long-term investment horizons and substantial capital pools, are uniquely positioned to bridge this gap. In Botswana, we continued growth of In Botswana, the continued growth of pension assets present a transformative opportunity for our nation's development as well as long-term prosperity. Today, we will discuss how we can unlock this potential to foster economic growth, create jobs, as well as deliver lasting value to the beneficiaries, while we are ensuring the financial security as much as we build a stronger nation with the right infrastructure. At Absa Bank Botswana, we are proud to be the key player in this ecosystem. Our performance reflects an unwavering commitment to driving inclusive economic progress since the first day we opened our doors in 1975 in Lobatse. We have been in this country for nearly 50 years, and I really take pride in the progress that we've made, which has been meaningful, and we have grown with Botswana year on year. Just in 2024 alone, we contributed 407 million in taxes to the national fiscus, reinforcing our role not just as a commercial enterprise, but as a responsible corporate citizen actively supporting the country's socio-economic priorities.
Botswana's Vice President and Finance Minister brought the heat in his keynote. He unveiled a national pension infrastructure investment platform targeting solar farms, student housing, digital highways, and even a north-south economic corridor.
So today I am deeply honored to stand before you today at a time when our nation stands at a profound turning point, a moment that calls not for timid steps, but for bold strides, not for borrowed dreams, but for homegrown resolve. At the outset, allow me to express my sincere gratitude to Absa Bank Botswana team for curating this vital engagement. We gather under the banner of a compelling theme, leveraging pension funds for infrastructure development, fostering economic growth, and creating long-term value for beneficiaries. This moment is no ordinary meeting of minds. It is a moment of shared contemplation, a sacred pause in our fast-moving world to reflect on a profound question. How can we, as custodians of a public good, wield the promise of pension capital to build a Botswana that is a paradigm of fairness, a paradigm of unity in our authenticity, a paradigm of shared prosperity. So today's theme, distinguished delegates, resonates deeply with the aspirations of the new Botswana, with the aspirations of the new government, with the aspirations of the Ministry of Finance, and aligns seamlessly with our nation's broader developmental agenda. It is the blueprint of a new development compact that affirms our dignity, that restores our agency, and unlocks the untapped potential sleeping within our borders. There is a yearning in the air, a true yearning for building a Botswana that is the best managed country on the African continent, a yearning of building a Botswana that is a true paradigm, as I said, of fairness, of unity, and of shared prosperity.
The finance minister isn't throwing caution to the wind, it's profit with purpose. As he put it, a return that builds hospitals and lifts generations is the best kind of return. Think long-term value, risk-managed strategies, and economic self-reliance. Industry pros like Dr. Keith Jefferis and Thato Norman joined the conversation.
You the same opportunity as an asset manager. What are you saying? What would you say are your challenges in this space?
Okay, thank you. I think I'll talk to challenges specifically to what we see in the market. I think Thato has touched on the challenges generally about the asset class and opportunities around it. So for us, we are operating just here in Botswana, and we've been around for about a year now. Some of the challenges that we've seen with infrastructure, it's largely around awareness of private infrastructure. So generally, when you think about the history of this country, infrastructure has been delivered by the government. So you find that even now, when there's so much capital flowing back into the market, there has not been a thought through around how that capital can actually be delivered within private infrastructure investments. So that's number one. And the result of that lack of awareness is that there's no space, essentially, for private participants like ourselves. So we spend quite a lot of time engaging with the other stakeholders, largely the ministry, on how to create that space. As an example, I think most of you will be aware of the 100 megawatt solar project by Scatec in Madinare. If you look at the conditions for that project, the requirement for local participation, as in selling to a local company, it's only after 4 years, right? From project development until that period, the guys can just operate without any local shareholder. So these are some of the engagements that we've had with the ministry. There's new tenders that came out last week Friday, so we'll see if they've made that adjustment. Then this other challenge that we see, it's the long project development cycle. Largely due to, again, it's a new area, even from the power side, the independent power producers, it's a fairly new concept in the country. The impact of that is that to develop a project takes just too long, especially for areas around permitting. Environmental permits take quite a bit. A lot of the land, obviously, it's agricultural land that needs to be transformed. That change of land use takes time. And also the licensing itself, because you need a generation license from Baron. So these are some of the challenges, but linked to that, you find that you actually don't have a one-stop place to go to. So you're going to, if you have two projects, you'll be, let's say, somewhere in the Kgalagadi area, and then another project, let's say, somewhere in the Sorowe area. You have to be shuttling between these two areas, talking to the different councils to get your permitting, whereas where IPP programs have been very successful, you find that they do have just the one-stop shop to go to, and you can get all the support to develop your projects. The other challenge, obviously, it's a new area in Botswana. We don't have a lot of experienced developers from a project development standpoint, from an infrastructure standpoint, because sometimes project development, people think real estate, but the project development for infrastructure is actually quite, it requires a lot of skill, and it's quite specialized. Because it's still new, because most of the projects we've had in this market have been very small, we have not developed that capacity. But it is encouraging that we're seeing very big projects coming into the market. I think we have 900 megawatts of solar that were released this past Friday, which each one of them, I think it's about 250, 200 megawatts. So we expect those to attract experienced developers who obviously, hopefully, or do skills transfer. Then the last part I'll speak to is that, you know, in projects, there's always this component of local components. And we find that funding is actually not part of that. They'll talk about you need to procure from local guys, you need to local contractors, et cetera, but nothing around requiring to actually source local funding. So I think it's something that we've actually engaged quite a lot with the government around it, because for us, we see it actually as a big risk if you're going to fund infrastructure with foreign currency, because these are very long-term projects, and you know what happens, the exposure from a currency standpoint. So that I would say are the challenges. I don't know if...
I'll move on to Dr. Jefferis. As an economist, we would like to hear your views. Can you provide a macroeconomic and public finance perspective on the need for alternative investments to drive the growth?
Sure. I think there's many angles to that. One is that our economic environment has changed a lot over the past decade. If you go back several years, we had very high savings rates, much higher savings rates than investment rates. There was a lot of savings around in the economy. We were running balance of payment surpluses. And government, of course, was part of that situation. It had very high fiscal revenues, running budget surpluses, and to put it bluntly, more money than it knew what to do with. And of course, in that situation, as government, you can finance a lot of infrastructure projects very easily without having to go to the market or to the private sector to get financing. And I think my former boss is here, Dr. Mandlebe, but I don't think he'll mind me saying that a lot of the project management and implementation by government, when there was plenty of money available, was not very good. Quite inefficient. Projects were not necessarily well selected or prioritized. And I think all of those situations have changed. So now we're running balance of payments deficits. We have much lower levels of national savings, and government itself is running budget deficits and does not have the money that it used to have to fund development programs and development projects. So I know my colleagues have talked about quite a lot about, Thato talked about the private hospital, and Oteng's talked about private power generation projects, but most infrastructure projects are public. That's what governments do. They provide or incentivize the provision of infrastructure, and they're in the lead. And I think, historically our government has provided infrastructure and paid for it. From a macroeconomic perspective, that's no longer possible. But we still need infrastructure. And so if we are going to develop further infrastructure projects, we need to bring in private savings to complement the public savings and public revenues that are financing those projects. And the whole environment has changed. We can no longer expect government to be the sole or primary provider of public infrastructure. We have to have private investors coming into those projects. Although our overall national savings rates are dropping, at the same time, where those savings are held is changing. We do have an awful lot of savings held in the pension funds. And those savings are looking for diversified avenues for investment. So the whole environment is changing. But what it requires is those public or broadly public infrastructure projects have to be structured in such a way that private finance can be part of the picture. You know, it's not the old days where a spending ministry, first prize would be, get my project in the budget. And once my project's in the budget, I go ahead and implement as government. Those days are gone. But if we're bringing in private sector finance into these public infrastructure projects, they've got to be structured very differently. And I think that's where a bit where we're lagging, is we haven't yet adjusted to that new reality.
As the global economy battles tariffs and shocks, Botswana is betting on itself, funding the future with its own savings and strategy. We're not waiting on aid, says the country's finance minister. We're building a legacy, funded by Botswana for Botswana. Snapflash fam, would you let your pension fund build roads, schools, or power plants? Let us know in the comments. Until then, keep questioning and stay informed.
Fearless.